Here's one of the main issues, is that when you think about a two-tier system, we've got the police. They're responsible for their affidavits. They need to work on evidence. They have to follow some kind of process. Child, Youth and Family, however, aren't responsible for their own affidavits. And all they need to uplift a child is a police officer. And if the police officer refuses to accompany them, they can go to the family court based on a without notice application, put whatever they want before the judge to get it rubber stamped, and then demand that the police come with them to uplift a child. And so the Child, Youth and Family have more power than the police in the fact that they're nowhere near as accountable. I'm not saying the police are perfect, and I'm not saying the IPCA model isn't without its faults, because it most certainly is, and even Sir David Carruthers publicly listed what those faults were and how he wanted to see them fixed. But Child, Youth and Family or Oranga Tamariki, are even less accountable than the police under the IPCA, and that should never be allowed to happen, because in the family court, often the information is hearsay, innuendo, gossip, unsubstantiated, made-up stuff. And with the any evidence rule, a judge can consider whatever they like as to consider the risk or the safety of the child.
Where's the human rights in that come in? You're entitled to fair trial before you're judged.
Well,
and children are removed before that judgment's made, or before you've had a chance to put in evidence before the court.
Well, as someone said to me...
Where's the fair and unbiased ability to have a fair hearing?
It's never been there in the family court.
Exactly.
And the other thing...
So isn't our human rights being abused?
Oh, definitely. And here's the other thing. In a normal court, you're innocent until proven guilty. In the family court, some could say it's almost the opposite. You're almost guilty until proven innocent. And you try and prove you're innocent on hearsay, gossip and innuendo, it's virtually impossible. Because if you're accused of something that didn't happen, you can't prove it didn't happen, because there's no evidence it didn't happen, because it didn't happen for there to be evidence of that. And you end up in this circular motion where it virtually becomes impossible to defend yourself, because if someone says it happened, they don't necessarily have to give the evidence that it did, they just have to say that it did.
Right, on that issue of human rights, how are we going to get human rights addressed in the family court? Because human rights are obviously being abused every single day there. Not just on the right of the parent, but also on the right of the poor innocent child, which is also entitled to a family, unless they're unsafe.
One of the things I'd like to see done with the family court is it switch from adversarial to inquisitorial.
Absolutely.
Now, at the moment, everybody's lawyered up, everybody goes in, and often the way you determine custody is by slinging off at the other party. You're automatically going to end up with people going at each other, and perhaps things being said and made up that shouldn't be. And often things are hidden from you. But with an inquisitorial system, there should be full disclosure, and absolute disclosure. Nothing blanked out. You know, when you get a psychiatrist report done on you, they say that's a property of the family court. So the person that the report's on don't even get a copy of it, even if you could understand it. So one of the things I'd like to see happen is that an inquisitorial system come in, where there's a lot less lawyers involved, the bare minimum of professionals when required, but where all parties have to be upfront with each other, and you can't hide behind anonymous complaints and stuff like that, because if it's an anonymous complaint you can't check the source. And there's been a few cases where people have got their neighbours to ring up to make a complaint in order to set Child, Youth and Family or Oranga Tamariki onto parents, and that kind of stuff shouldn't happen.
But what about this issue with regards the Human Rights Select Committee?
Well, that's an interesting one. Years ago, the Human Rights Commission wanted a Human Rights Select Committee at Parliament, separate from the Social Services Select Committee. And the governments are very reluctant to bring it in, because it's been asked for a number of years and it hasn't been brought in. So what I'm thinking about doing between now and the election is actually starting up a petition to that effect. Is because human rights, it sounds like a simple issue until you actually start delving into it, and it can get quite complicated. And we need a high level committee that can look into all aspects of human rights, irrespective of where they occur, including in the family court and the justice system and everywhere else, that can demand stuff be given to them and demand that people who need to can come and give an account of what is or not happening. And I believe that at the moment that can only happen in a select committee, because even the Ombudsman, the Children's Commissioner, the Human Rights Commission, they have such limited powers and menial resources. There's so much that's closed off to them where we need an all-encompassing committee where the only limit to what they can see is at their disposal or their choosing.
So your belief, I know it's similar to mine, your belief of the ability to get justice or natural justice in the Child, Youth and Family, New Zealand Family Court system at present?
It's very difficult, if not outright impossible, to get justice, first of all, without a checkbook, because I call it checkbook justice. Because if you, again, this is getting down to the adversarial side of it, if you've got a big enough gun of a lawyer, you might have a chance. But I've known people to spend $40, $80, $120,000 in the family court and still be no better off than when they first started, except for being broker.
And what about the psychological abuse and the legal abuse going through the family court and the results of the applicant trying to secure their children? What about the result of that?
Well, I think there needs to be a component in the family court where they have to actually look after people's well-being. And there's been some models overseas where that's worked quite successfully. But to answer your question, I know fathers that have taken their own lives. I know, and mothers and children, simply because of the dealings, having to go through the family court system and the soul-destroying result of what it does to you.
The issues with regards natural justice and bias by the system to be able to get justice, when you look at the situation of Oranga Tamariki, the lawyers, the psychologists and everybody that's deriving money from taxpayer funds to try and separate a parent from the children.
Oh, look, that's a never-ending battle. I'll give you one example. I'll just go back one step. I went to a family group conference, which I call Foregone Conclusion. Mm-hmm. There was 12 professionals in the room. There was 4 family members. The amount of money spent on that FGC, and the reason why I call them Foregone Conclusions, is because when you can determine the day it can be on, which suits some people and excludes others, the time it can be on, which again means that some can make it, others can't, the kind of information that can and can't be put before them, you can stack the deck against a family. So a lot of them are predetermined before the family members even get into the room by the professionals. But my point is, for the thousands of dollars it cost for that day, that money would have been better off going to help the family.
And then the effect that the professionals are extenuating the conflict so they can make more money.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly the problem. A lot of lawyers for children, it's interesting because there's been times when Oranga Tamariki have had issues with them because they want to close off a case, and it's a lawyer for child who'll keep it going, because as soon as that case is closed off, that's one less income stream for them until such times another child comes along that they've been appointed to look after.
Don't you think that the taxpayer of New Zealand should be pretty upset at the money that's being squandered and wasted on such a fat system rather than a open and transparent system that's getting directly to the core?
Well, one of the things people need to ask themselves is, when SIPs failed so grossly that they had to be closed down in 2017, what was the family court's role in that? And the answer is a lot, because you can't keep children in the system without the family court in one way or another eventually agreeing to it. So it's all very well to say Child, Youth and Family or Oranga Tamariki are a problem, and believe me, they are. But no one's willing to go and say, how is it that they got away with it? How come the family court allowed these children to be kept in the system for so long that damaged them? And why is the family court also not equally being called to account, which is all the lawyers, all the psychologists, all the judges, and things like that? That's got to be a question. The family court almost gets a free pass. And whenever you have an argument with Child, Youth and Family, they'll say, oh yeah, but it's a family court has the final decision.
The recent family court reform, where the investigation was done, said that the family court is not fit for the purpose. My biggest concern with the ministers of justice that I've seen are absolutely not taking on board any of these things that need to be done. How can we have Mr. Little as the Minister of Justice when he's not making those kind of changes and holding those kind of systems to account for the abuse of his own citizens?
I've read that report, and the only thing I agree with it is the fact that they say it's not fit for purpose. Part of the other problem with that report is it's professionally focused. When you read a lot of what's in there, it's very clear lawyers and all the professionals have had a lot of input into it, and I agree with some of the points I've made. However, when you talk to a layperson like who's been through the family court, their perspective of it is slightly different. And I think it's interesting that whenever they review the family court, the professionals have the most say. They never come to the user group, or very rarely ever do, to say, what's your experience in the family court and how can we change it to better help you, and in return do our jobs better.
Well, we've got Tracy Martin that won't even engage to talk with any of the people that want to complain about Oranga Tamariki. I mean, she's not representing the people, and she's a minister.
You're not the only one having problems getting access to ministers, because I mean, even I can't get a meeting with Andrew Little, and he comes to Greymouth to do with the Pipe River Agency, and I've been trying for 2 or 3 years to get a meeting with him when he's in town, only for 5 or 10 minutes, and it's never happened. I've been given such a runaround. And it's a sad when the people who are supposedly at the top of the pyramid won't take the time to go out of their way to listen to someone for at least 5 or 10 minutes.
And that's why the citizens, I mean, if you look at this election that's coming up, I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
And the sad thing is, whenever an MP thinks it's okay to take client information and use it for political purposes like that, that's dirty politics. And it's sad that the MPs are so busy trying to fight amongst each other and get stuff on each other to bring each other down, they've forgotten about what it is to be an MP and serve the public.
That's exactly right.
Their focus should be us, not each other.
That's right. I totally agree. But why can't we do that? And so, do you think that's why there's so many smaller parties set up? Usually there's a trend towards a serious change or people's concern about democracy when you have a lot of new parties, small parties being set up.
I think you're exactly right. That's why they're set up. And in a way I feel sorry for the smaller parties, because when you look at the way that MMP's gone, it definitely favours the bigger parties until such time as a coalition agreement's done. Then the little parties start to get their demands met, and there has to be some kind of consensus at some point on the final agreement. But I think the surprising party for this election, and I'm not saying people should or shouldn't vote for them, because I'm not going to direct people on how to vote. I think they should have an intelligent and informed decision. But I think the surprise will be the ACT party, because I've got people who are staunch Labour who have said that they're going to vote for the ACT party, who they never ever would have in their life done it, because he seems to be the most sensible one out of all of them and not engaging in the dirty politics.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Although, Jacinda's got her shining star, and National seem to be totally imploding, and it would seem that New Zealand First is done.
Well, we'll see. I mean, that's been said before. The sad thing I find about it is we've become much like, if you're a likeable person and a named entity, you can get your party across the line, where it should be about the quality of leadership, the type of person they are, and about what the party can bring to the table to support their leader. And that should be a two-way thing. And I find it very disappointing that we've, John Key, a lot of people, I said, I just voted for National because I like John Key and he smiled a lot on TV. Well, actually, that's not
a good reason to
not
vote.
the reason I would vote for anyone. I want a bit more substance to my voting than that.
So your general view is that there is a lack of integrity within
absolutely.
our ministers who actually represent us in our parliament?
Absolutely.
So what chance have we got to get those ministers to make effect on the state civil servants that are supposed to be working for us?
Well, it's interesting because in the 1980s, right up to about 1989, the public service, as it was once known, started to change, and when they changed it from public service to state services is where a big flip was done. So the bureaucrats ended up more serving their state masters than their publics who they were supposed to serve. And you can see that coming through time and time again with, you know, the leaking of Winston Peters' pension information, and how when Paula Bennett attacked those two beneficiaries who used it. In times past that never would have happened, because at least I believe leading up to the 1980s, the public servants would have said, no, we're not going to give you that information to use it in a public way against citizens of New Zealand. Now it's a free-for-all, anything goes.
And so, what is the best way for citizens to be able to get control of their democratic rights back? Because clearly that's being lost, because they promise us everything for 3 months before an election, and then as soon as they're in, everything that they've promised goes out the door, and we sort of run on a bit of a dictatorship almost.
Well, that's where I'd like to see the rise of independent MPs. Because at the moment with the waka jumping legislation, let's say for example I stood for a political party and I annoyed them by speaking up for my constituents. Even if I was elected in a seat, if I refuse to comply with the party's request, they can actually kick you out of Parliament under the waka jumping legislation. So now MPs are, without a doubt, beholden to their parties. Where if you're an independent MP, you are your own party. The only downside to that would be that an independent MP could do whatever they liked, and basically they're only accountable to themselves. But if
Or their constituents.
Correct, or their constituents. So I'd like to see the rise of independent MPs, because at the moment we have a system where people who want national in will often vote for someone like ACT if they don't want to vote for national. Or if they want national out, they'll often vote for Labour or New Zealand First. So they're more looking at who they want to be in and who they want to get out as a party, rather than the quality of MPs they've selected to stand for them. And that's where one of the biggest issues has been.
Well, Graeme, thank you very much for your afternoon. I hope your book goes really well.
I hope so too.
And we look forward to you possibly becoming an independent MP in the future.
That would be interesting.
That would be very interesting. I'm sure you'll get a lot of support.
Thank you.